You're very welcome along to the Matchbook Cheltenham Trail. Hard to believe it is 4 weeks to the Cheltenham Festival. Someone told me that and I genuinely had to double check it. It's this short February month, happens every year. We've talked about it loads. It's just going to fly in. I'm your host, Daniel Hussey, and delighted to welcome Cheltenham Trends expert Matt Tombs and Racing TV's Donn McClean each and every week leading up to the Cheltenham Festival. The guys, every week we're going to review the weekend with a view to the Cheltenham Festival and some Cheltenham trends. We're going to cover a race or two each week. This week we're going to cover the Arkle given Lulamba's performance and also 3 eye catchers each from the guys. But Matt, a bit of bonus trivia slash things to be aware of that myself and Don weren't on something changing in the cross country in terms of the handicaps. So do you want to just give listeners and viewers things that it's not just related to the Cheltenham Festival, but overall for cross country starting from the 1st of January this year?
Yeah, that's right. I think it's going to affect the cross country. It's a new rule for all handicaps in Britain. You can't run from further than £15 out of the handicap. And it'd be rare it'll have much of an impact on the other festival handicaps, but the cross country's only a £19 weight range, not the full £26. And equally importantly, attracts highly rated course specialists. So Stumptown has a BHA performance figure of 163 for winning off 157 last year. So if he runs as top weight 163, then only horses rated 144 or higher will be in the handicap proper. And any horse rated below 129 therefore wouldn't be eligible to run. So based on the current ratings, that would mean the second home, the Trials Day race, Sharif de Lest's 126, third Escario 10 125, 6 Unanswered Prayers 120, 7th Peaches and Cream 124, Plastinet as well 127. They'd all be ineligible to run. Now, given last year 6 were balloted out, the Cup was 132, they might not have got a run anyway. But I think there are more of them lower down the weights this year, and there is a potential difference for punters. If your ante-post bet's declared but balloted out, you get your money back. By contrast, if they're ineligible for the race, you don't. So historically, that's been because horses are too highly rated to get into races like the Kim Muir with a 145 ceiling at the moment. They're expunged when the weights are announced. Here, the situation's slightly different. The likes of Sharif de l'Est can be declared, but then be ineligible. So how would those bets be settled? Is it the case that you've been declared, not got a run, so it's the same as being balloted out and you get your money back? Or is the horse ineligible and so not deemed to have been declared and the bets will be settled as losers? Asked Bet365, they said they settle it as a loser. So if you are anti-post betting in the cross country, you do need to bear that in mind with horses like Sharif de l'Est. When analysing the race, you need to factor in that plenty of the course specialists may not be allowed to compete. So those that can may be sure to come the off.
Yeah, because it's an interesting angle. A lot of people, obviously, the course specialists now, it's a handicap now. People are becoming a little bit more popular. I'd say over the years, they've become more popular, but that is very interesting and something I missed anyway. That so for any listeners and viewers, we just said we throw that at the start, a little trivia. We'll do this a weekly segment, so Matt's going to find something each and every week and to fill us in terms of information for the Cheltenham Festival. But very much looking forward to going through the show here today. Before we get going, a reminder, if you can take 2 seconds, we see a lot of people subscribing to the channel for the first time for free through these videos. If you can take 2 seconds, hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. It'd be much appreciated. And pointing in the direction of our new Cheltenham sign-up offer. It's our most generous offer leading up to Cheltenham Festival. If you don't have a Matchbook account and you'd like to get involved, just enter the bonus code POD100, POD100, and you get £100 worth of free bets. Full T's and C's available both on matchbook.com/promotion and under the ticker there in just a second. So that bonus code is POD100. Matt, let's start with you again. Just hit us with the trend for the Denman and your thoughts on the race, and has it set up the Gold Cup picture now? Finally, we can settle now in for the next 3 or 4 weeks.
Well, I wish it had set up the Gold Cup picture. Finally, we've still got the debate about who's going to run Fact File in particular. But this was good. I liked Aticaleur's performance here. Since it became a Grade 2 in 2003, 11 winners have run in the Gold Cup. 4 have won, 2 of the others have been placed, 50% profit. The last to try, Clandis-Abo in 2019, so its influence has faded a bit in recent years. Just 4 runners. Despite the money for leave of absence, it turned into the match it looked likely to be. But Long Presshead had a hard race in the Cotswold a fortnight before. He's a bit knowing these days. Jumped left again here, didn't really get into a rhythm. Maybe he was enjoying not being able to lead. Hard to know what sort of level he ran to, so it's hard to know what the winner achieved in his first win in a graded conditions race. But generally, I thought he was pretty good. He was inclined to get into the bottom of his fences, but warmed up better at the business end. You do wonder whether there might get him at it in the first half of a Gold Cup, take him out of his comfort zone. Ruby Walsh was on ITV suggesting cheek pieces might help keep him focused in the early part of the race. And I can see that. I think some trainers still associate headgear with ungenuine horses. But as we've seen with Majborough at DRF, can be equally effective with completely genuine horses who don't naturally concentrate. So if you ignore his Betfair chase flop, then he apparently didn't travel well on the way up to Haydock, so he never went a yard. Other than that, he's won 6 in a row over fences, overstaying a marathon trips on a sound surface and deep ground. What underfoot conditions do you want in a Gold Cup? It's tempting to say deep ground to slow the others down. Connections seem to think he'd want a sound surface. He's unexposed, keeps winning. You can't rule him out. Horses who run in marathon chases 2 from 100 in the Gold Cup this century. One of those was Native River, who won in a swamp. So my gut feeling is the market leaders will have a bit too much class for him. But he's adds a fascinating dimension. I'm delighted he's running 11.0. Fair enough.
Yeah, Don, for you, any further thoughts? I mean, that's the general narrative. Just might lack a class for a Gold Cup, but look, he's going to be there on merit.
Yeah, no, he is. Just firstly on the cross country chase thing. I mean, it's an excellent point by Matt that Matt's brought up. I would have hoped that from an ante-post, just thinking about it, because I just learned about it from Matt today. If you don't qualify for the race, then I would have hoped that would be money refunded. I would have hoped it would have been treated as batted out, because you don't know until declarations by how far you're going to be out of the handicap. It's not like a not 145 red and 146. You don't qualify. You know that beforehand. But if you're declaring not knowing yet what the top weight is, or by how far you're going to be out of the handicap, if you are, then you would hope that connections would get entry fees back, and that punters therefore would get ante-post bets refunded. It's a watch and see, and maybe different bookmakers will treat it differently, but I'd hope that would be the case. Anyway, on Haiti Color, yeah, look, what a fantastic horse he's been. Like, he won the National Hunt Chase off a mark of 135 last year, then won the Irish National of 141, then won the Welsh Grand National of 154. So he keeps on going up in the weights, and therefore being faced with more arduous tasks, but he keeps on delivering. And this was, you kind of hoped and thought that he would go out and do something like he did. He got into his rhythm. Sean Bowen seems to get a great tune out of him, that he just always gets him into his rhythm on front. It's going to be more difficult to do that in a Gold Cup, you would have thought, and on better ground. As Matt was saying, that Rebecca Curtis did say that she'd like to get him back on better ground, but you just think that maybe he's such a galloper and such a stayer, albeit the Welsh Grand National was running in unusually goodish ground this year. You would have thought that soft ground would suit him well, and if he just gets into that rhythm up on the front end, then yeah, he's going to last there for quite a while. And you suspect that at some point he'll be passed. He could run a big race and finish 3rd or 4th. But yeah, great that he's in the mix. L'Empressé, 11-year-old L'Empressé, we finished 2nd behind Spillan's Tower last time in the Cotswold Chase, giving him £6, and he's run a good race again. That leave of absence ran well. He was making ground on the leaders when he made a mistake at the 4th last. Of course, he wouldn't have got to Haiti Color, but I thought he could maybe be marked up at least a little bit on the bare form of that run. He's going to be better and better ground as well. He finished 2nd. He was only just beaten by Deep Cave in the Silver Cup at Ascot on his previous run when Deep Cave got up the inside. And Johnny Who was back in 3rd place that day. He could be a horse for the Ultima. He's run twice at Cheltenham. He won the 3 Mile Novices Chase at the October meeting there back earlier this season. So he's a horse maybe just to keep in mind. The Anthony Hollyball horses are going well as well. But yeah, great to see Haiti Color doing this, and he's definitely in the Gold Cup picture now.
Yeah, we hope we have our Gold Cup picture, but as Matt said, we still don't know, and probably won't know right up until, I guess entries deadline, whether Back to File will get supplemented for the Gold Cup, although seems highly likely, of course. Game Spirit, now we are covering the Arkle later in the show, but we did want to cover the race itself. And Matt, I watched this live. You can do this with your trend, obviously. I watched this live, and midway through the race I said, I'm not sure Nico can win this with the way he's travelling, and even if he does, it will be a struggle. Therefore the Arkle picture's wide open. I wasn't quite expecting that last couple of furlongs when he just blitzed the field. So it went from not an impressive performance to, taking it all in context, a very impressive performance. Where are you at with Lulamba?
Absolutely fascinating, wasn't it? I've watched this race a few times. Brilliant. The trend is winners have finished 5-1-1 in the Arkle. I imagine he's going to really split opinion once the preview night circuit gets underway, because he took time to warm up again. bit sluggish, some of his early fences, got into the bottom of some of the obstacles, a bit ski-whiff at some. Sometimes when he's asked up, he's high and a bit slow in the air, jumped the water like a puissance wall. On the race IQ data, got the worst jump index of the 6 runners. Now, he may jump better off better ground. Connection certainly seemed to think that. And then, as you allude to, he was caught in a pocket, and you think, has he got the tactical speed to get out of this? If you'd not seen him before, you'd have thought he was really struggling at the cross fence and early in the straight. Some were saying that was inexperience, but you think that was more about jumping at speed, taking him out of his comfort zone. And then he did what he did in the Henry VIII. It was as if Nico had pressed a super booster button. He powered clear, jumped better at the business end. And these were the weights, low 150s horses beating, in theory better than in the Henry VIII. I wasn't sure at Sandown whether the power he looked to have shown was a bit of an illusion given the opposition. 3 beat will be beaten since. But having watched this, I'm more convinced that he's a top-class horse in the making. So the question is about Trip, which we'll get into in more detail when we get to the Arkle preview later on. And Liberty Hunter's worth a quick mention. He was creeping into the champion chase from the rear last season when coming down, tipped up in the Schloer, and looks as if he's been in a bit of a rebuilding process. It's 2 runs since. His hold-up style isn't suited to an old course Grand Annual, but if they decide instead of going for the Grade 1s to go for a big handicap, I think he's got one in him off 151.
Yeah, Don, for you, again, similar, like you have to be overall happy, very happy with Lulamba's performance, but there was worrying signs the way he travels, so it will bring that Trip question that we will cover a lot in the Arkle preview.
Yeah, for sure. And, like you watching it live, I thought he was in trouble going across even leaving the back straight. Nico de Bonville had to give him a little bit of a shake, and then over the cross fence before they turned for home, he was along the inside. He didn't have a lot of racing room. Calico kind of came in towards him, didn't cut him off, and left him enough room to go around the bend on the inside. And then, after that, his turbo kicked in. Very similar to Altior in lots of ways. But I had to look back at Altior's first Game Spirit win, and he led from early that day. He always travelled, but then the Altior that we come to know and love later in his career, he was the one that looked in trouble before his turbo kicked in. But it is really interesting. Lulamba will not have the luxury of doing something like this in an Arkle. You would imagine, like, the winning time for this race was 4 minutes 10.96 seconds. The winning time for last year's Arkle was 3 minutes 53. So 17 seconds slower, and heavy ground over 2.5 miles a furlong at Newbury. Different ball game to 2 miles in an Arkle, and well, we don't know yet, but you're kind of assuming until we know differently, it's going to be good to soft ground. So, and given the way he runs, and as Matt was saying at Sandown as well, he's probably going to hit that flat spot at some point, and then it's just a case of when he comes out of it, and therefore how much he's going to be able to pick up better horses in an Arkle. Like it's shaping up to be a really fascinating Arkle this year, and we'll come on to it now. I'm looking forward to getting stuck into it later on. But Lulamba, and look, you have to remember, it's only his 3rd chase. He was only beaten once over hurdles in the Triumph Hurdle when Poneros beat him by a neck, and he exacted his revenge in Poneros at Punchestown. So, look, it goes without saying he's a top class horse. But I just worry about taking a short price about him for an Arkle, that especially on good to soft ground, that he just might get outpaced at a crucial point in the race.
Yeah, interesting comparison with Altior, because obviously that's the easy comparison, but if his first Game of Spirit is completely differently ran, then that was only later in career. That does raise a few doubts. Let's go Opera Hat race, Don, and start with you on Dino Blue. Now, the Mare's Chase is fascinating because this show is looking forward to the Cheltenham Festival, of course, especially with 4 weeks to go. You've got obviously Spindleberry coming back in. You've got Dino Blue, like the tried and trusted. Where's she at versus previous years? Because I think that's what most bettors and punters want to know going into this year's Mare's Chase.
Yeah, look, you think she's at a similar level, Dan. I'd say she's a 9-year-old now, just turned 9. I don't think we learned a huge amount from the Opera Hat Chase. She's won it again. Won it last year. She was meeting mares that were rated vastly inferior to her. Like, she's 159, Bioluminescence 142. You have me in Stitches 130, and then Jete Porte is in the 120s. So she was sent off an 8-1 on shot. I think she won like an 8-1 on shot should win. Whatever an 8-1 on shot is, and whatever performance it's supposed to put up. But she did it well. So she's bang on for the Mare's Chase. Yeah, look, I'm sure we'll be doing the Mare's Chase in detail in the future, but Panic Attack is 147. She's a really progressive mare, so it's going to be interesting if she does take a chance there. Spindleberry is 154, and yeah, look, she's going to have to bounce back now. It was a big ask going and running on an Irish Gold Cup. It never happened for her. She didn't seem to really get into her zone at all. She was too keen stepping up and trip. And in on the positive side, she didn't have a really hard race there. She was pulled up quite early in the race. So hopefully she's going to be able to bounce back from that and remain a big player in the Mare's Chase. But yeah, look, I'd say Diana Blue, I don't think we learned a huge amount about her here, just that she's healthy and well and on track again for the Mare's Chase.
Yeah, Matt, anything we learned? Because I think that's the question is like punters want to know this year versus last year. I'm interested, Don's like pretty similar level. I mean, are you happy with that? A little bit of improvement? Because people were getting quite excited by her performance there yesterday or over the weekend.
Yeah, I'm not sure she's really going to be improving at this stage. But as you guys have been talking about, is she in the same form? Because she's had 2 penalty kicks since being 5 lengths second to Founder 50 in the Four Trio, where a blunder cost her. She'd have gone very close, might well have won, but for that. So you know she's well in herself, but a 9-year-old in her 4th season chasing, I'm always a little bit wary of mares with that profile. For all this has been a really good trial for the Mare's Chase in its short history. The 5 winners have all run, finished 2-1, R4-1. So I'm just holding fire a little bit for betting in the Mare's Chase. As Don was saying, looks a deeper race this season, and there are some interesting horses in it. He's covered them. One who I've got a bit on my radar is Diva Luna, still a novice. I thought Ben Pauling wasn't that keen to run her in this, but in his Racing Post stable tour, he suggested that's the most likely target at the moment. So this is a race that's starting to bed down the Mare's Chase. Dino Blue sets the standard, but at 2.75, I can see this being a more competitive field against her this year. So she might be making the market. I suspect I'll be trying to take her on.
Okay, yeah, lukewarm on Dino Blue there, but great to see her back, and she will be heading to the Mare's Chase. Now, one horse we don't know exactly where he may go after the back of this performance, Don, is from the William Hill Hurdle, is Tudu Quanti here. In that heavy ground, obviously it's not going to be a champion hurdle trial, but at the same time, these horses not entered in the races they could potentially be in and have to be supplemented. It's just adding more intrigue to the Cheltenham Festival, though frustration as well. I mean, what is it about these? Obviously entries cost money, but for big yards like Paul Nicholls, you think they'd keep their options open a little bit for just in case you see a performance like this that means he may have a place chance in the champion hurdle.
Yeah, I don't think we could have seen this couple. I certainly didn't see a performance like this.
Not like this, yeah.
Like he carried 12 stone to victory, and doing a piece for the Irish Field beforehand, like going back through the weights. Persian War is the last horse to carry 11 stone 13, so he carried it. Now I know it was a way less classy race than we have had. Like we've had some brilliant renewals of the William Hill Hurdle. Mekistan won it in 97. Mekistan actually carried a £4 penalty for winning the Lanzarote Hurdle. Back in the day when the Lanzarote Hurdle was running over 2 miles, and then Madonna won the champion hurdle. Persian War, he won it off 12 stone, and he was so good he won the next 3 champion hurdles, including the one a month later. Tutti Quanti, it wasn't as high a class of a handicap. Like he's only rated, I say only, but he's 138 was top weight of 12 stone. So it shows you the class of race that it was. But that said, it was a wow performance. I know performances and winning distances can be accentuated on this type of ground, and it was really heavy ground at Newbury, or it looked like it. But he got out in front, and as people often make the point, we kind of think a big weight, it's harder to carry on heavy ground, but actually on heavy ground, class comes to the fore, and he's obviously, well, he was the classiest horse in the race according to official ratings, and he proved that again. Just got out in front and went further and further away, won by 15 or 16 lengths in the end. So he was off 138 here. He's up to 151 now. He still has a fair way to go to be a champion hurdle horse. He's only had 9 runs over hurdles, so he's got the potential to improve again. He was rated 130 when he won the Jerry Field, and he won that well as well. He got £8 for that. So he's 151. So he's going to have to take another leap again to be a champion hurdle type horse. And I suspect, given that this performance has come on this type of ground, he would want the ground to be soft. But I'd say Connections, they don't have to make a decision until 5 days beforehand. They'll wait to see what the ground is like, and if it's looking like it's going to come up soft or heavy ground, then every chance that they would supplement him, and I would say that they should. On this performance, he's got the potential on this ground to go and at least take his place in a champion hurdle lineup.
Yeah, I'm no weather expert, but it's still raining in Ireland anyway. I don't know about you guys. So surely it's odds on there will be obviously soft in the description on day one, but it could be a little bit towards heavy depending on the watering tactics, if any, Matt, but we won't go down that road. Tell us a little bit about this performance. And it is that point Don makes, and it's been around for years and years, but heavy ground tends to exaggerate those winning distances. I think of a lot of Welsh national winners, would they win that on a good ground, regardless if the horse is suited or not, in terms of the distance from the previous horses. But you still got a win like this is still an incredible performance.
Yeah, real routing of his rivals, wasn't it? Like Don, I didn't see this coming, but he has improved leaps and bounds. Very much, the Ditchit way, very patient, and when horses aren't that mature, he ran this horse in the Supreme last year. Now that probably really helped his development, even though he wasn't ready to be competitive then. I think just on the weight side of things, for most of this century, the top weight was 11-12. It got changed from 12 stone about 25 years ago, and it's only just gone back to 12 stone. So that's one of the reasons. But as Don was saying, one off 138 in great style here. Make a Stand won this off 140. We've had other handicaps, winners coming through to win a champion hurdle. Epatante 137, Rock on Ruby 145, both in the Jerry Field. And now that is earlier in the season. But this was as an impressive performance as any of those have put in. And when a progressive young horse wins a race like this, hard to know what they're capable of. To put it in context, with the mare's allowance added in, his mark of 151 is exactly the mark Golden Ace brought into the champion hurdle last year. And, it's a weak champion hurdle. The favourite, the New Lion's Fallen, and then won a weak Beulah in workmanlike fashion. There's no horse to be afraid of here. So if he is very ground dependent, fair enough. You wait until, as Don said, 5-6 days out at the confirmed stage to supplement him. But I wouldn't want to be laying 21.0 with a run. I think if he does get his ground, I'd be very open-minded about the ground. You only need a week or so of dry weather with the drainage there, and it'll dry up to lovely ground. But if we do get a wet run up to Cheltenham, the water table will be so high, we could get genuinely heavy ground. And picking up on your point about the distances that horses get spread out on heavy ground, sometimes when a winner spread eagles a field like this, all the attention's on them. But it's worth noting Wellington Arch beat the rest by 18 lengths. Had the winner not been in the race, we'd be talking eulogistically about his performance. Now, it could be the winner handled the ground much the best, no better than a smart handicapper, in which case Wellington Arch has just run okay. But in some ways, it reminds me of the 10 up 9 years ago when Acapella Bourgeois made all won by 32 lengths. And all the discussion afterwards was whether he was therefore an outstanding novice, so the one to beat the Broadway, or whether he'd been given a freebie and was grossly flattered. And it turned out to be the latter. But what punters, and me included, missed was if he had got a freebie, when you took him out, Road to Respect to won the other race by 11 lengths. Yet because he'd been beaten a distance, he was basically left on the same mark, bolted up in the plate of 145, and went on to win 3 open grade ones. If you take the winner out of this, Wellington Arch has been kept on 132, and he was taken out of a couple of races earlier in the season because of testing ground, so he might improve again on a sound surface. And this has produced 3 winners of the race formerly known as the Coral Cup. He could be underestimated in that. He stays that trip well. He's 34.0 for that. He's one to keep an eye on.
I like that, Matt. I do like that argument. Yeah, going back 9 years to find a similar to suit the argument. However, the ears pricked up when I heard Road to Respect's name versus Acapella Bourgeois. Let's go to the Boyne Hurdle at Don, and I do want to start with Staffordshire. Now, I don't know if anyone else is talking about this, but he was entered and declared for a handicap in Leopardstown, and then the following week he's winning the Boyne Hurdle. It sounds like that probably was just the plan all along, and seeing who came third in that race maybe proves that point. But he is a high class hurdler, distance hurdler now.
Yeah, no, he was top weight in that handicap at Leopardstown, and he was on my shortlist for the race before he was taken out as well. But yeah, like what an admirable horse. He's really found his meat here this year or this season. Like his previous run, he was only just beaten by home by the Leon the Galmoy hurdle, beaten a half length by a 159 rated hurdler who was giving him £9. I think he was giving him. But big performance. He won the Pretemps qualifier at Punchestown earlier in the year. So he is qualified for the Pretemps, and then come on here. And the race probably wasn't run to suit him. Maxim got a little bit of an easy lead at the finish speed of 107%. But and it did look like maybe Maxim, when he kicked on over the second last, that he was going to have them all in the stretch. He won the race last year, Maxim. But Staffordshire not. We know his attitude. We know how he likes to dig down deep. And he's gritty and determined and stayed on really well up the hill. And won well, yeah. He's got a mark of 147 now. Is he a Pretemps horse. I'm not sure he's looking more exposed than you'd ideally like to see in a Pertemps final horse, but if he does go there, you know he's going to run his race. Pertemps while it can be a little bit of a grueling contest, not always, but it can be. And if it turned into that type of test, then you definitely want a horse like Staffordshire Knot on your side, or that type of test could suit him. So he just keeps on improving. My worry about him going into the race is that he'd had a couple of hard races in a row, and the Galway Hurdle run on heavy ground on Thaestes, Chase Day, Goran Park. It's always a tough race, but he bounced out of it just 2 weeks later and was, appeared to be as fresh as ever there on Sunday. So no, brilliant performance by him. Thought Maxim ran well, and this is kind of Maxim's time of year. I just keep Maxim in mind for something. He tends to pop up between kind of February and April. So just kind of keep him in mind. Like when he won this race last year, he came into the race on the back of a couple of poor runs. Same this year, but he's bounced back to form here. Look, he's 9 years old now. He's not getting any younger, but it's still a horse who there might be a prize in him yet later on in the spring. And better days ahead. Like he ran a massive race. It was his first run since the Irish Grand National last year, back over hurdles. He's got a chase mark of 153. He finished second third in the Brown Advisory Chase last year. He won the 10 up on this day last year. He's actually got an entry in the Ryanair Chase, but I think the Grand National is the plan. And with this run under his belt, he stayed on well to take second place to get the better of Maxim for the runner-up spot. It was a Gordon Elliott 1, 2, 3. So I'd say he's one who's going to be a player now in the Grand National as well. He's in kind of still a relatively unexposed horse at these type of staying trips.
Okay, Matt, for you.
Yeah, I definitely echo what Don said about Staffordshire Knot and Maxim. He'd definitely be the sort of horse pop up, and often at a big price in a race over the next couple of months. So he's one for your tracker. This hasn't been a Stayers Hurdle trial. Runners 1 from 23, and the last home, Hidden Valley Lexi, anyone entered in the Stayers, so that's probably not going to change. But overall at the festival, 6 from 77, 81 point, 123% profit. Produced 3 cross-country winners, 2 Coral Cup winners, and an Albert Bartlett winner. And 6 of those 7 in the last 9 seasons, 5 trained by Gordon Elliott, had the first 3 home here. So I still think it could have some relevance for the festival. Staffordshire Knot, it's interesting about the Pertemps final. He could be up in the early mid 150s in Britain. You normally get about £4 or £5 from the BHA handicapper. And there are very few horses qualified for the Pertemps who look like they've got any chance of running, who are rated much over more than about 140. So whether he runs or not could make a big difference to the shape of the handicap there. There are still qualifiers to come at Haydock, Chepstow and Naas, so it might look a bit different after that. But that's a thing to keep an eye on if you want to bet on that race. And better days ahead. I agree with Don. I think we'll run a blinder here. And at first sight, the Broadway form looks terrible. But Becky Watson looks a national project. Stella Story has done his ground yet. Gorgeous Toms ran okay. Second in the intermediate down roll, 4th in the Coral Gold Cup off 151. Better days ahead. Gordon said he's hard to get fit and he ought to improve a fair bit for this. I kind of thought that a soft ground Ultima might suit him off about 155. Hasn't been an Irish train winner of that for 20 years, but I thought he'd be ideally suited to it. Sounds like the Irish National might be the plan. That's a much tougher race, and this Century Only R Duke off 153 has managed to win that off a mark in the 150, so it'll be a much bigger ask. But I do think there's a big race in him later this season.
Okay, we'll move on to the Kingmaker, Matt, and stick with you for your trends. And Steel Alley making it 3 from 3 over fences. Interesting Arkle contender.
Definitely, and I really hope he runs in the Arkle. We need these horses who, he's about 17.0. I think the price is about right. But these horses who won the big pattern races, the big trials, we need them to be coming to Cheltenham and not going elsewhere. If Cheltenham is going to be the Olympics of the sport we want it to be. The history of this, 16 winners have run in the Arkle, 2 won, 6 were placed. A couple of out of the 8 runners have won the Grand Annual. Hiding in a conditions race can be a good way to get yourself handicapped as a novice. Only 3 runners, effectively became 2 with Mambo number 5 jumping, falling apart. He got behind in the Wayward Lab, but his class got him out of trouble there. But he's not going to be a 2-miler. And he has had the 4 runs over fences now. So he's eligible not only for the Jack Richards, but also the plate. He's still off 146 after this. It could be well handicapped. And Ben Pauling in that Racing Post Stable Tour talking about both those races. I think he could improve a fair bit for the step up in trip. I wouldn't want to be laying 51.0 for the Jack Richards. I don't think he's quoted for the plate as yet. So he's one to keep an eye on. Still, Ally, he was left, I suppose, with a simple-looking task once Mambo number 5 had jumped his way out of it. He won decisively without looking a superstar. Did screw at some fences. He isn't the biggest to be jumping out of that ground, so maybe back on a sound surface he'll improve. He had plenty of hurdles form on better ground, and his 3 chase starts been on soft or worse. So he's the type who might improve a lot on spring ground and therefore be more of an Arkle contender than the bare form would suggest. Let's hope Guy Walters allows him to take his chance. Mirabad's 4th run over fences, and he was still competitive until the business end. He's eligible for the Grand Annual and left on 138. He looks a player in that. His positive run style, well suited to an old course Grand Annual. So for all that's a notoriously unpredictable race. He's 26.0 and definitely one for the long list for the Grand Annual.
Okay, yeah, Don, any further thoughts on the race?
Yeah, I fully agree on that. On what Matt said about Mirabad for the Grand Annual, his running style is key. It's a race in which it is difficult to make ground from the rear. He likes to get out in front. And actually, until going around the home turn, he was still in there with a chance. And Steel Ally did move up and was outside at the second last. And while it took him a little while to get past him, it always looked like he would. But Mirabad jumped well at those 5 fences down the back straight at Warwick. They suit him really well. His jumping was good. It's only his 4th run over fences as well. And his chase mark of 138, it's only £5 higher than his hurdles mark. So he could be a well handicapped horse. And you can see him in a Grand Annual. Novices have a good record in the race as well, getting out in front and rolling away. And yeah, seeing if they can catch him. Steel Ally, yeah, I'm sure if the 2.5 mile novices chase at Cheltenham was still there, he'd be running in that. Like the Grade 2 race that he won at Ascot before Christmas was 2 miles 3. He finished 2nd in the National Spirit at Fontwell last year. That's 2 miles 3 as well. He's only beaten the neck in that. So he's a horse who stays this 2 mile trip really well, but gets further and is probably better over further. That said, yeah, hopefully he does go and run in the Arkle. And you kind of wonder how we had so many horses to run in the Arkle and the Grade 1 2.5 mile and the Brown Advisory Chase. The answer is we didn't. And even now the Arkle fields are small, but hopefully he does run in. I can't see him winning an Arkle. I think there are pacier horses in there, but he definitely deserves a chance to in the lineup and to make the lineup. Yeah,
it's been a great change, I have to say, and I think finally this first year, I think a lot of stars have aligned a little bit in terms of a little bit more competitive in terms of there's no standout horses from both ends, particularly after Final Demands defeat. But it does seem the novice chases are more interesting this year. Another interesting market, Matt, I was looking through it this morning. The Turner's Novices Hurdle, the Bearing Bingham. And a lot of very competitive price because we don't know exactly where every horse is going to go. Active Innocence, very impressive there over the weekend.
Yeah, as you say, it's a really interesting market in the sense that, for me, the Supreme and the Bearing Bingham are for the speedy novices, the Albert Bartlett's for the stayers, even though you might think with the Bearing Bingham trip that was more akin to the Albert Bartlett. But yet so many of the best novices, the speedy ones, they all seem to want to run in the Supreme. So the Bearing Bingham might be a market for a bit of value. Winners of this have not done well, 5, 3, 6, 9, 7, 7, 5, 6 in the Bearing Bingham. And I often talk about how that's a test of speed at the trip. And so those with the 2 mile graded form do so well. Flip side of that, races like the Sydney Banks often produce winners without the required turn of foot. But that said, feeling that Active Innocence was only in this because the same connection's Old Park Star had stamped himself the leading 2 mile novice. Originally, Nicky's plan was that Active Innocence would be their 2 miler. So perhaps he does have the turn of foot for a Bearing Bingham. They went pretty steadily here, finishing split 107%. He did quicken up much the best. He put Glance at Midnight away easily, albeit the tempo of the race, he was nothing like as far clear of him as Idaho Sun was or even Old Park Star. I'd just be a bit worried about the fact he couldn't give the juvenile Manila Yoga £20 at Newbury. Manila Yoga was getting £3 from Maestro Conti and 5 from One Horse Town when just a solid 3 lengths third in the finesse. Unless those two are triumph winners or placed horses, you want to be beating a Manila Yoga on those terms if you're going to win a typical Bearing Bingham. Perhaps given the history that Newbury race was Manila Yoga's Gold Cup, but Active Innocence is a contender, what looks an open Bearing Bingham, but 13.0 looks about right. I thought it was a good performance, but it didn't blow me away.
Yeah, maybe for Active Innocence, Don, it starts with if you can explain the Newbury defeat and justify it to yourself, then he becomes a lively contender for the Turners.
Yeah, the kind of the key for me in the Newbury race was that Manila Yoga then went and got beaten in the finesse. I thought at the time that Manila Yoga just could be very, very good, and he still could be good. But I just, yeah, the form of that run just didn't work out. If Manila Yoga had gone and won the finesse and won it impressively, then that would have obviously added ballast to Active Innocence's run. But yeah, look, like Matt, I thought he did it well. He travelled well. He picked up well. He won nicely. But like Glance at Midnight was well beaten in the Formby behind Idaho Sun. Sinatra was maybe a little bit disappointing. Finished behind Active Innocence in the Newbury race back at the Coral Gold Cup meeting. And won at Sandown next time, but was pretty well beaten here. But like, yeah, I think Active Innocence did it well. And it was interesting, as Matt kind of alluded to, that Nicky Henderson was saying afterwards that not so long ago he thought that this horse was the faster horse, faster than Old Park Star, and now they've reversed. So Old Park Star is the pacey horse, and Active Innocence is the one who goes in the Sydney Banks and then is on track for the Turners. So, you know, it's interesting that that's happened. But again, as Matt was saying, I always think that the Turners, it's a speed test over the intermediate trip, and the Supreme is a kind of a stamina test over the minimum trip. So pace is important in the Turners or the Bearing Bingham. But yeah, you can see Active Innocence running well without maybe being good enough to win it.
Okay, and final race, the Apples Jade Mares Novice Hurdle, and Stanouche justified favouritism. Don, how impressed?
Yeah, she was really impressive, Dan, for me. She couldn't have been much more impressive. They didn't go a great pace, finishing speed of 113%. Now, she was well positioned by Brian Hayes throughout. She was just up on the outside, and she picked up well. Like she'd won well at Navan the time before that, won a handicap, beat a Grant Gadate, who was a good handicapper, probably better over fences than hurdles, but she beat him well off a mark of 120. She actually travelled into that race, this is her penultimate run, better than her finish, if you know what I mean. She looked like she was going to win nicely, then came under ride, then looked like she might not win at all, but then she stuck it out gamely and stayed on well up the hill at Navan. Again, same course and distance for the Apples Jade, a listed race, listed Mares Novice Hurdle, and she won it well. She quickened up nicely. She came away. Interesting, Colin Murphy saying afterwards that he thought that she'd get further, and he was talking about the Albert Bartlett Hurdle, and that's interesting because if she does get further, she's better over further, then yeah, she's definitely an interesting contender. It's great to see Colin Murphy with a couple of good horses. He had Savant, ran really well at the Dublin Racing Festival as well. She was unlucky not to win, probably. But Stanouche, yeah, like she got £7 for that handicap hurdle win. She's got a mark of 127. She was entitled to go and win well, but she did it as well as you would have hoped, and maybe even a little bit better. Thought the runner-up Potiza is an interesting mare as well. Like she won her bumper at Cheltenham back in April. Then she joined Willie Mullins. She was beaten by Alreza Glass at Punchestown on her previous run, where she did nothing right. She jumped to her left. She jumped poorly. She lost ground in most of her flights and kept on. Was beaten, I think, 5 lengths in the end by Alreza Glass. And interesting that they put her in at a shorter price than Alreza Glass here. So the market thought that she would reverse places, and she did. Going left-handed probably helped her. She was a bit out to her left again, which is, it's not as noticeable, or it's not as big a negative, obviously, on a left-handed track. But she didn't jump well. Well, she jumped a little bit better than she had at Punchestown, but she still made some really bad mistakes. So she must have some engine to keep on to take second place in front of Alreza Glass and My Lucky Colleen. So that was only her second run over hurdles. She hasn't won yet over hurdles, and interesting that Willie Mullins put her into a listed race, even though she's a maiden. So look, you can see her going and winning her maiden now, all going well, and if she can just jump a little bit better, she could take a good step forward, Potiza. So she's one to keep in mind. But no, I thought Stanouche was good, great for Colin Murphy and Brian Hayes, and I think that's her third win now in a row. So she stayed well, and yeah, she could be even better over further.
Okay, I want to keep an eye on. And Matt, for you, what sort of trial is this race for the Donn Run at the festival?
I've had 5 renewals of this so far, only 2 runners, but Brighter Days Ahead did finish a good second in a very slowly run Dawn Run. Clearly, this is over further, and whilst the Dawn Run, they tend to go quickly, and it's quite a stamina test at the 2 mile 1 trip. This often can be more for stayers, and as Don said, Stanouche definitely falls into that category. There hasn't been a runner from this in the Albert Bartlett yet, but that could well change. And Colin Murphy is one of my go-to trainers at the festival. Just partly that he's a top-notch trainer per se, but he's very selective about what he brings over. Since his first run, Brave Inca won the 2004 Supreme, had just 24 runners. 5 have won and 9 of the 19 losers were placed. So if he's going to bring Zanush over, that'll be his first runner since Impervious won the Mayor's Chase 3 years ago. Need plenty of respecting. I wouldn't want to be laying the 34.0 with a run in the Albert Bartlett. And he particularly got a good record with Mayor's Bottle of Liverdet, Fettered Lady. So she handled the deep ground well enough here, but Colin was saying afterwards he thought not only would she improve for the step up to 3 miles, that at 3 miles, the better ground might suit her well. So she's in the mix for what's such an unpredictable race. She's one I'll be keeping an eye on the vibes about. There's a 2 mile 6 grade 3 mares novice at Limerick around the same time as the festival. So she'd have that as an alternative. But if she does line up in the Albert Bartlett, she shouldn't be underestimated.
Okay, and that concludes our weekend review. We've got eye catchers there, which will sort of bring some of those other races there that we haven't covered. So Don, I want to start with you with your 3 eye catchers.
Yeah, we'll start with the Wall Park from the 10 up chase, Dan. And first of all, on the 10 up chase, brilliant for Oscar's brother, brilliant for the King brothers, Conor King and Daniel King. JP McManus has acquired Oscar's brother since we saw him last, but he was really good in winning the Florida Pearl chase. He beat Cocktail Divan in that. And Boss of the Brownies, Cocktail Divan, was impressed with winning his beginner's chase at Leopardstown over Christmas. Boss of the Brownies ran a big race behind Argento Boy in a grade 3 race at Nace next time. So the form of the Florida Pearl is solid. And he went in here, this was his first run since, but Daniel King, he didn't seem to have any worries at all about his fitness because he kicked him off in front, and that's how he likes to race. So he set a good pace. It was a sedate enough pace that he set, but his jumping was good, bar the third last. He just got in tight to the third last fence, and they kind of closed up on him a bit. It looked like Western Walk maybe was coming to challenge, but then Daniel King just gave him a squeeze and away he came again. And Conor King only has 2 horses. Grey Jude's the other one. He ran a big race as well on the previous day at Nace as well. So, but you know, he's proven here with Oscar's brother. He was a good hurdler. He stayed on well to finish third, beaten like a head and a neck or something in that good Bective Stud handicap hurdle over 3 miles on a furlong at Navan. So he stays really well, and he stayed well here. He's got lots of options. It's really interesting that they entered him in the Grand National, the Aintree Grand National. This was only his 5th run over fences. He's still a novice, obviously. But he's got all the novice options as well now, and it's going to be really interesting to see how he goes. But really, really great for Conor King. He's just got a handful of horses to produce Oscar's brother to win this and win it well. But the Wall Park is the eye catcher from it. I'm probably not alone with the eye catcher from this race, but like just the way that he stayed on to take second place in front of Western Walk. Now his finishing effort might have been accentuated a little bit because Western Walk didn't seem to get home. I thought going into the race that he would see it out. He finished third in Western Walk. This is finished third in the Faugheen chase behind Gold Dancer and Final Demand when it looked like he'd get further, but he seemed to run out of stamina here. He's a half brother to Churchstone Warrior, who also won the 10 up chase for Jonathan Sweeney, his trainer. But I think Western Walk could maybe step back down and trip. But the Wall Park, it's a swift run over fences. He's now got a chase mark of 142, which is 13 pounds lower than his hurdles mark. Like he was such a good hurdler last season for Gordon Elliott and JP McManus. Won a Pertemps qualifier at Cheltenham in October, finished 4th in the Long Walk hurdle, finished 3rd in the Stairs hurdle, and 4th in the Liverpool hurdle. So he competed in all those high-class staying hurdles. And at Goran Park on his previous run, he went around the inside for most of the way, probably on the worst of the ground. So yeah, look, he could be whatever he goes for an Ultima or National Hunt chase. He's just a potentially really well handicapped horse over fences now, especially compared to his hurdles mark, and he stays really well. So I think the National Hunt chase could be the race for him. The test of stamina there over 3 miles 6 could suit him really well. And the other two then are Knight of Allen who finished second behind Holloway Queen in the novice handicap chase at Newbury. I just thought that this is over 2 miles 7.5 furlongs on heavy ground. It seemed to stretch his stamina beyond its limit. He travelled best of all into the race. Looked like he was going to be a player. Then Holloway Queen, she stayed on best of all and ran out a really good winner in the end. But Knight of Allen, he finished 4th behind Miami Magic on his previous run on New Year's Day, when that was a race that was run at a really sedate pace at a finishing speed of 111%, and he was out the back early on, and he stayed on really well to take second place. That was 2.5 miles. I think he won at Newbury over 2.5 miles back in December off a mark of 122. He's only 127 now. So either a drop back down and trip or the move to better ground, or maybe both could suit him well. And I was kind of thinking that Greatwood handicap chase at Newbury in March could suit him well, 2.5 miles at Newbury, where he's proven. But I think wherever he goes now, Jane Williams trains him, that he'll be interesting with not as stern a test of stamina as 3 miles on heavy ground presents. So maybe 3 miles on better ground, or 2 miles or 2 miles 6 on even on soft ground should suit him well, because he handles the ground okay. And the other one then is Powerful Paddy from Thurles on Thursday. There he was in the morning. It looked like he was the second best of the Willie Mullins horses. Brian Hayes riding him, and he was a bigger price than the Paul Townend horse Fou de Trois, but he was actually backed into favouritism. He was sent off as marginal favourite 2.5, just in front of Fou de Trois. But he travelled well, and he was just starting to stay on when he made a really bad mistake at the second last flight. And I kind of took my eye off him after that. I thought he was well beaten, but actually he stayed on really well to finish second behind Puma's Dream, who's actually a half brother to the aforementioned Maxim. But Powerful Paddy, yeah, he was entered at Clonmel now on Thursday, but I see he hasn't been declared for that. So this is his first run over hurdles, his first run for Willie Mullins since joining from Alan McIntyre. He had 4 runs in bumpers, but I think he's a maiden hurdle winner in the waiting, and then after he wins his maiden, he should be able to move on to better things.
Okay, the Wall Park, Knight of Allen, and Powerful Paddy for Don's 3 eye catchers this week. And Matt, before you hit us with your eye catchers, a little bit on the Wall Park race and the 10-up race, and the Wall Park's well and truly the talking horse after their race on Twitter for sure. And sometimes these horses are over talked, so therefore the not lazy analysis, but someone like me is going to go, well, they're clearly going to be over bet next time. But everything is run on its merits, and every price it's based on the field he's up against. Where is he likely to go?
Well, I think there's a bit of history there that might guide us. A few years ago, there was a real trend in the Ultimate for Grade 1 hurdlers to win as novices from miles below the hurdles mark. Wichita Lyman, £14 low on 142, Ben Salem, £10 low on 143, Holywell, £12 low on 145, and Tumpor 2, £15 lower on 148. And I got the impression after on Tumpor 2-1 10 years ago, a line was drawn in the sand. No more handicapping these Grade 1 hurdlers on their chase form. Yeah, it's a conundrum for the handicapper, but I think you have to go that way. The only hurdler can be minded over fences, try and get a lower mark. But when they're rated so highly over hurdles, it's just inviting handicap plotting in the novice chases. And then you pop some headgear on for the handicap debut, more positive tactics, and hey presto, the horse improves a stone. And so personally, I'd be giving the Wall Park 155 the same as his hurdles mark, and saying there just isn't enough evidence to give him a different mark over fences until you can see what he can do over those obstacles. And they did something similar with Good Time Johnny a couple of years ago. So if Connections feel he's a slow learner who needs more time, then just keep running in beginners chases and put him in a handicap once he's got the hang of chasing. So I think that it's pretty unlikely he's going to get into the Kim Muir or the National Hunt chase. If you're going to do that, from what we were discussing earlier, you know, if he's balloted out, then you get your money back. But if he's over the 145, you don't. You definitely want to be taking non-runner, no bet about him at the moment.
So you're saying he do you think the handicapper will rate him 155? I know you say that's what you'll do.
I think there's a good chance they will.
More likely than 145, for example. I saw someone tweet saying 1 to 10 he'll be over 145, which I thought was about right.
I think so, because there's an element of you put him in 146, but then he's in a great position in the Ultimate.
Yeah.
So I think you've got to try and do that. I mean, I watched all 4 of his races, and he's not really been put in them. You know, he ran on here, and that was definitely a more encouraging run. But I just don't see how you can give him a handicap mark and a stone lower than his hurdles mark on the basis of that.
We'll see.
Too simple about it.
Anyway, 3
so
eye
my
catchers.
first eye catcher is one who's equally obvious, I should think, that everyone else will have seen. That was Saratoga. Now, that's in that rated juvenile at Naas on Saturday, the one that from its 8 renewals has produced 4 winners of the Fred Winter. So a lot of people have been watching that. 3-1 at Naas, and both the first 2 be possible Fred Winter horses, I'd have thought. But Saratoga, 3/4 of a length second, given a considerate ride. He's got his 3 runs in now, so he's eligible. He was a 92 rated flat horse, and in receipt of £7 from the mare. It'd be fascinating to see what mark he gets for this. Cut in the Fred Winter's been between 119 and 122 in each of the last 4 renewals. So he could be nicely near the bottom of the weights. We'll see. And last week I put Porrig Roach's Win Some, Lose Some up as an eye catch. The yard's just coming into a bit of form, having been winless since October. So yeah, he's very short in the market. I wouldn't be suggesting backing him, but I can see why the bookmakers are running scared of him. And he's one you need to have on your short list for the Fred Winter. Second one's Hollygrove Chacha, who reverted back to hurdles, made all in good style, nicking a few lengths at the start to beat the 139 rated Jubilee Alpha by 4 lengths in a 2 mile 5 listed mares race at Warwick. This made a mess of her hurdles mark. She's raised £11 this morning to 140 over hurdles, but just £4 to 133 over fences. And she didn't look to get into a rhythm at Windsor's figure of 8 track on her latest chase start, but her previous form looks pretty good, having beaten the winner there, Bluey, run well in the receipt of lots of weight in the Colin Parker. And she hasn't run over a conventional left-handed course over fences so far. Given how she jumped at Exeter, she might improve a lot for that. But Jamie Snowden seemed pretty cool on the prospect of going to Cheltenham. She didn't run well in the Dawn run, and he says that she's more likely to mix it between hurdles and fences. She's had 3 chase starts, so she'd be eligible for the Jack Richards if he had a change of heart. But she's one for the notebook. I think she can win more races this spring, especially if it keeps raining, because she does handle testing ground very well. And finally, Barton Snow, who made it 6 in a row since joining Joe O'Shea a year ago. He'd beaten the now 140 rated Viraflay at Stratford, gone from strength to strength. And whilst he stays this 3 miles that he won over here, he might prove best at shorter. He won over 2 miles at Cheltenham's Hunter Chase meeting in May. His trainer Joe O'Shea's Britain's answer to Barry Connell. He said that Barton Snow beat Constitution Hill in a gallop and that he's a certainty for the Aintree Fox Hunter. Now, to be fair to O'Shea, he has trained 2 of the last 5 winners. Cousin Pascal went off 67.0. Gracchus de Baum won last year at 23.0, so perhaps we should be paying more attention to what he said. But on both occasions, he booked one of the best British amateurs to ride, James King and Hugh Edwards. Both of those did ride Barton Snow last spring. I doubt he'd go to Cheltenham. I don't think he'd get the trip, but he's definitely one for the shortlist for Aintree. His head carriage wouldn't please everybody. Looks like he takes a bit of handling, but if King or Edwards is booked, I could see him being a big player in the Aintree Fox Hunter.
Yeah, interesting with what you've outlined there. What price you'd go off? Barton, Snow, Hollygrove, Cha-Cha and Saratoga are the 3 eye catchers for Matt. Time to move on to the Arkle, and we will cover this from an ante-post perspective. Don, I'll actually go to you first, and then might come back to Matt's trends, and then final selections from both of you guys. But Don, just the prices that we currently have a Matchbook: Lulamba 2.7, Copic de Board 3.7, Carghese 7.8, Romeo Coolio 16.0, big drifter there, which potentially looking like he's going Brown Advisory / maybe not at all, who knows. Irish Panther 20.0, similar price Kappa Joy Pike, and 24.0 Steel Alley, who we covered earlier. So where are you thinking with the current prices, what we're going to be left with on the day in terms of declarations and perhaps final prices? Is there any value in the market right now?
Yeah, it's a really interesting Arkle as we speak here, Dan. Look, Lulamba was tightened up after he won the Game Spirit. I thought they might have left him alone, actually, but I suppose he's won impressively in the end, just for all the reasons we were outlining earlier on. I just suspect he could be vulnerable in an Arkle, especially if it's run on good to soft ground, no softer. But look, he's a top class performer. He's a top class juvenile last season. He's 3 for 3 over fences now. He was good at Sandown in the Henry VIII. He's a dual grade, or a grade 1 and a grade 2 winner now at the grade 1 in Novice Company, the grade 2 in Open Company. So it's hard to argue with that CV. You can understand why he's favourite. Copic de Board, but the reports on his piece of work have been very positive there over the last couple of days. So it looks like he's back on track. I think he had an operation to remove a chip in a knee. So we haven't seen him since Punchestown. He missed Christmas, missed the Dublin Racing Festival. So it's a big ask going into an Arkle on the back of just 1 run over fences. Western Warhorse did it. Sprang a big surprise. But he'd had runs over hurdles before that, before he had his run over fences. And Wellchief, likewise, he'd been running over hurdles earlier in the season at a high level, then had his run in a chase, and then went and won the Arkle. So there is precedent there, but only one run this season. Willie Mullins is a genius, so he's in the right house for trying to accomplish something that isn't accomplished very often. But it'll be a good training performance now if he does go and win it. He was such a high-class hurdler last season, the Supreme Novices Hurdle winner, obviously, and he was so good. His jumping was really good when he won his beginner's chase. He it warmed as the race went on. He was a little bit free and a little bit enthusiastic through the early part of the race, but once Paul Tennant allowed him stride on in front, his jumping down the back straight was good. His 3 best jumps were at the last 3 fences. They got progressively better as he went on. So that's obviously going to stand to him. But it's just going to be so exciting to see how that pans out. Romeo Coolio, we know he's a 2.5 mile horse minimum who is potentially a Gold Cup horse for the future, all going well. And that said, he's a 4-time winner now over fences. He's a triple grade 1 winner over fences, and he needed every yard of the 2-mile 1 furlong trip at Leopardstown to get up and catch Irish Panther at Christmas. And similarly again against Cargese, it looked like she had him beaten on the run to the last, then he closed up, then she made a bad mistake at the last, then she came back at him. So and it's it's a conundrum where they're going to go. And I think the Ryanair has been ruled out, even though it's over the right trip. So it's either the Arkle or the Brand Advisory Chase, or maybe on like the Ferryhouse, it's the Willow Worm Gold Cup is the right race for him. But I know Connections want to go to Cheltenham, so he could do both. He could go on to Cheltenham and then come back to Ferryhouse. So he's a player, all right, if he does line up in the race. But I prefer Cargese. I just think that the better speed test will suit her better. She was unlucky not to beat Romeo Coolio. I think if she hadn't made that bad mistake at the final fence, she would have beaten him. We spoke about this at the time as well, Dan. Like I didn't anyway appreciate the severity of the mistake that she made on the initial view, but it was only when you saw the overhead camera you could see how much ground and how much momentum she lost. So for her to get back going again and close Romeo Coolio to a neck, that was a big performance. Also key, I think, is her Cheltenham form. She's run there twice. She finished second behind Majborough in the Triumph Hurdle, when the two of them had it between them from a long way out. It looked like she had Majborough's measure actually going over the last, or going to the last at least, and he just stayed on better on the far side and got up to beat her. But then she went back. She won the County Hurdle last season. So I think all of that, better ground at Cheltenham will help her, a greater speed test of the Arkle over 2 miles exactly, not even 2 miles, as opposed to 2 miles at a furlong on heavy ground at Leopardstown, then I think that'll suit her better. So she's at the top of my list at the moment at the prices. And the other two on my list were Kapaji Pike, who seems to have surprised everybody this season over fences. Like he beat Salvatore Mundi. Salvatore Mundi was a 1-7 or 1-8 shot at Thurles in November, and he seemed to beat him on merit. And then he went back to the Grade 3 race at Punchestown, and he won that as well. Beat Predators Gold, a Better Fancy Stable Companion, and Jacob's Ladder. And Jacob's Ladder was an impressive winner of the handicap at the Dublin Racing Festival. So that's all solid form. But that was over 2 miles, 3.5 furlongs. He'll be dropping down in trip as well. He ran in the Turners in the Bearing Bingham last season at Cheltenham, not the Supreme Novices, and he ran in the Mersey Novices Hurdle at Aintree, not in the Top Novices Hurdle. So they're kind of the intermediate trips he was running over as a hurdler. Then it's a case of, is he going to have the pace for an Arkle, or is he going to even go there? He's another one who might wait till Ferryhouse. But he's an interesting contender. And the other one is Irish Panther, who only just got caught by Romeo Coolio in the Grade 1 race over Christmas. Again, Eddie and Patrick Hardy, they did say that they weren't definitely going to go to the Dublin Racing Festival. They were going to see what the ground was like, and I suspect the ground was just too soft for them to allow him to take his chance. So it looks like he's going to go straight to Cheltenham now, to the Arkle. But I wouldn't mind that. He was a progressive horse for the late Edward O'Grady, and then came on and was impressive in his first win over fences at Naas when he beat Jacob's Ladder. Again, that form has been working out, and then big run in defeat behind Romeo Coolio last time. So he's just a little bit of a forgotten horse in the Arkle picture, I think. So he's definitely on my short list, but Cargese will be at the top of it.
Okay, Don effectively taking on the top two in the market at current prices. Matt, it is interesting on the two Mullins horses, first of all, and you can hit us with your trend as well, that's heading into the ticker. It's rare, is it, that Mullins has two, like Townend will obviously pick Copic de Boer, but like Cargese's a serious contender here as well, if that makes sense. So like you've got two really top class novice chases, not much in them on the Mullins team. So like someone like Danny Mullins could pick up a great ride and dictate this race perhaps.
Yeah, I think they're both real contenders. I definitely agree with Don that I prefer Cargese to Romeo Coolio. They did have quite a hard race there. I think Romeo Coolio might have had the harder race, very slow, about 93% finishing speeds. But she, as Don explained, dropping down in trip, more jumping, better ground, then I think she would be really well suited by that. So she's definitely got a chance. My approach to the Arkle is all about speed and jumping at speed. Always a lot of debate about whether you want a pure 2-miler or an intermediate trip horse. So firstly, the relatively few pure 2-milers. The vast majority of horses have a range of trips they're effective at. And when they have a class advantage over the opposition, that range broadens. There is the occasional horse like Captain Guinness, who's a pure 2-miler, but that's really because he'd be effective over shorter if such races existed. the vast majority of champion chases are effective over the sharp 2.5 miles of the Melling Chase at Aintree. They may stay intermediate trips, but they aren't stayers. They're really fast horses. And in the Arkle, what's different is there's just one cohort of horses, one season's worth of novices. In the champion chase, there might be 3 or 4 cohorts. And so quite often, you've only got 1 or 2 top-class novices running in an Arkle. And if there's only one, and they're ideally suited at this stage of their career by an intermediate trip, they often outclass their non-top class rivals, even though the trip isn't ideal. Gaelic Warrior did that 2 years ago. If there's a top class 2-miler and a top class intermediate trip horse, then if the top class 2-miler fluffs his lines like Matchbook did last year, then the intermediate trip horse Django Bay wins. But if they both run their race, the top class 2-miler almost always wins. Well Chief beat Kicking King, Sprinter Sacra beat Q Card, Duvan beat Sizing John. It's hard to remember a top class intermediate trip horse beating a top class 2-miler when both have run to form. The closest I could think of was Captain Chris beating Finian's Rainbow. I suspect Finian's Rainbow might have been a bit short finisher at that point. So the trend that relates to this is to do with hurdles form. And it's horses that achieved a Racing Post rating of 160 or more over hurdles the previous season, 10 from 20 since 2002, 46% profit. Often key players in the Arkle, they've just been winning their chases so easily. You can tell more about how fast they are and what trip they want from their hurdles form sometimes. So hurdles RPRs for the ante-post market leaders here. Kopek de Board 160, Salvatore Mundi 155, Lulamba 154, Cargis 152, Romeo Coolio 150, Kappa J Pike 136, Irish Panther 133. So the result of all that theory, my starting point is want to start with the top 2-class miler, and then you look at the actual horses. So good as Cargis and Romeo Coolio are, I think there's a pair of top-notch novices in here. And to my eye, and a lot of people's, I think Lulamba doesn't jump like a 2-miler. It takes a while to warm up at his fences, and he had to be stoked up a fair way from home at Newbury. Now, he then powered clear, but that kind of looked like stayer at the trip to me, and albeit a very high-class one. So if Kopek de Board doesn't strut his stuff, I think Lulamba will be able to outclass the others, even though he's not a 2-miler. But if Kopek de Board can overcome his inexperience, then both my eye and history tells me he'll have too much speed for Lulamba. So the big question for me, how much of a concern is coming off one chase start in November? Don's explained that World Chief and Western Warhorse had uninterrupted preps during the season. They've been running over hurdles, and that's definitely a big difference. Neither they have been off since November, but I'll be putting up an article probably next week on the Matchbook Insights page about Willie Mullin's record at the festival with seasonal debutantes and also horses off one run, interrupted preparation. There'll be more detail on that, but Willie stands alone at being able to do that. I would absolutely trust him to minimise the chances of Kopek de Board's lack of experience catching him out. And Don said when he made his debut at Navan that once he settled a little bit, he was much better in the second half of the race, jumped really well, Paul couldn't pull him up. And I was really pleased with that because he was a bit ignorant as a hurdler. I thought he might just charge at the fences, but he was clever when he needed to be. And he had some sort of schooling race the other day at Punchestown. Danny Mullins, who was on in Perry Pass, 157 rated horse, said they just couldn't keep up with Kopek de Board. Paul was gunning him into the fences, making him have some meaningful experience. So that all sounds very positive. He will need to settle on because he's a keen goer, but lots of fences early on in the Arkle will hopefully help with that. It's going to be a fascinating matchup, but as usual, I'm with the top class speed horse because he's 4.0 roughly. For me, that makes up for the risk of the inexperience catching him out. So I think Kopek de Board's the right bet here.
Okay, so that's interesting. We've got Don effectively taken on with the current prices, the top 2 in the market. You're largely with them and you think it's potentially between the two, Matt. Who goes off Fav between the two?
I think the vibes will be crucial. I think if the vibes are strong for Kopek de Board, then he might do. But Lulamba, I think he's going to be one of those horses that really divides opinion on the preview night circuit. It'll be fascinating to see who thinks what.
Yeah, Don, for you, who goes off Fav?
Yeah, I fully agree with that. I think where they are at the moment is correct. You can understand where they are. As we get closer to the time, though, we'll probably learn more about Kopek de Board. on the previous circuit. Like, I suppose out of sight, out of mind. We haven't seen him since November, so it's understandable that he's behind a Game Spirit Chase winner at the weekend. But I think as we get closer to off time, they'll converge, and I'd say they'll be close enough on the day.
And then Matt, for you, so Cargisi, she won't get closer to what she currently is to Kopek de Boer. So that was my next question. So like, I mean, she's been running in that DRF race, 7.6 versus 3.65, 4.0 ish for Kopek. You think that'll be largely the same difference come race day, or is there any chance that there could be some money for the 2 mile Cargisi and her Cheltenham record as well?
I think it'll all depend on those vibes, because if Kopek de Boer is really strong, and I think Don's right that then he will get close to Lulamba in the market, and it won't be much in it, then she's probably going to drift. At the moment, part of her price is that if things don't go well with him, and he has had an interrupted preparation, then if Paul's on Cargisi, then she's going to be a lot shorter. If, as we expect, Paul's on Kopek de Boer, she might drift a little bit.
And then Matt, finally for you, so out of the big prices, and I know you mentioned it's probably between the top 2 in the market, but if I said to you, you have to have a bet the current prices on anyone outside the top 2 in the market that would be shorter on the day, is anything making your shortlist on that question?
I suppose Cargisi will be it, because I think she's the next best horse. It's hard to see one of those. We'll get the scratches through shortly. I suppose the old lunatic Salvatore Mundi, he was good the other day. He's got the ability in the hurdles form to play a part, but equally he's likely to pull too hard and be tailed off at the top of the hill. But he's 50 odd on the Matchbook Exchange, so you could throw a few coins at him if you like long shots. But the Arkle, very predictable race generally, and I do think we've got really good horses in it this year, and therefore one of those top 2, top 3 with Cargisi is going to come along and strut their stuff, and therefore it's going to be hard for the outsiders to win.
And final word to you, Don. Anything putting you off from Matt's case in the top 2 in the market? Are you happy to go to war with Cargisi?
Yeah, the fact that Matt's with the top 2 puts me off Cargisi straight away.
He said top 2 there. He even said top 2, maybe top 3 there.
Yeah.
So
look, I like Cargisi as a mare. Yeah. I liked her for a while. I thought she really ran a gutsy race the last day. She was unlucky not to beat Romeo Coolio, and if she'd beaten him, she'd be shorter now than she is. I love her going back to Cheltenham. Her 2 runs there have both been very, very good. The better ground will suit her, the speed test will suit her. And yeah, like Matt's right, Paul Townham will probably ride Kopek de Boer, but Danny Mullins, he's a top class rider as well, and I wouldn't be at all averse to Cargisi going in there with a big chance with Danny Mullins on board as well.
Yeah, I think Kopek goes off Fav and just beats Cargisi. Who knows? We'll see. If Lulamba wins, I mean, there's a ponderous long-term form boost ahead of the champion hurdle. Who knows what he could go off after his one run this season. But yeah, my thanks to both Matt and Don. Thoroughly enjoyed our usual show, but also the Arkle as well. And as I said at the top of the show, we're only 4 weeks away from the Cheltenham Festival. All we ask, if you see in the ticker, if you can hit that like button, subscribe, and leave any comments or questions for Matt or Don. We'll try to get to it over the coming weeks leading up to the festival. But we'll be back this time next week for another weekend review and covering a couple of Cheltenham races. Bye for now. Enjoy the week.